Welcome to Spruce Grove Alliance Church, your home.
So this morning we're going to continue our series on Richer Than You Think, and we're going to be touching on two things in particular. And as you can see here, Brent's been kind of walking us through the series, going through each different word. So we hit on victory, propitiation, sacrifice. And this morning we're going through justification and reconciliation. And it took me a while to narrow down those two words. Those two words encompass a lot. And so who knows what justification means? I just want to see. Okay, good. This sermon will be good. Okay. And then who knows what reconciliation means? Okay, that one. Okay. I figured that would probably hit home a few more times. So this morning we're going to look at two different things. And so reconciliation is what we're going to go on. And so this is just how Jesus unifies us back together with him. And so how does he do that? There was a divide. There was a separation between us and him, and he unites us back with him. Reconciliation is where you come together and you work out the differences, and there is no more differences. That's gone. And so that's what reconciliation is. Our relationship, our proximity, is brought back together, and that which was lost in the garden, or at the garden, is found again because of Jesus. So, and then the next one is justification. And this one you guys are very honest, which is good. But this is how we are made righteous by God, being cleared of all charges by Jesus' sacrifice. So you have to think of justification as this legal term. Okay, that's what it was meant in Scripture to be. There's a lot of, maybe other different places that it can be used, but in legal is what you need to understand it through in that lens, is that you are exonerated of all of your sin. How? Because Jesus said so. And that is because he is the judge. And we will get through all of that this morning. So, reconciliation touches on the, Brett wanted me to say something, and I don't understand it fully, and that's fine. I'm just going to skip it. Brett, you're not here. He's watching at home. So what we're going to do, let's open up on reconciliation first. We need to be reconciled, and this insinuates that there is a divide. And so I want you guys to process what that divide might be already. All right? What is it that divides you and Jesus? What is it that divides you and God? Because if there needs to be reconciliation, it insinuates that we had a quarrel, that we had a difference of opinion, and that we are no longer on speaking terms. So have you felt a discourse grow between you and somebody that you know? Anybody? No? Wow! No discourse between you and somebody else? It's a little bit of honesty over here. Okay? Because I see this in my house every single day, okay? Every single day. I hear it from the other room, all right? Ocean! No! Right? Just yelling at each other, and then you can just hear, ah! Okay? Happened, this morning as well. And so this is just what it is. We have discourse, and then I need to go into the room, and I need to go, okay, what happened? What happened here? And then one of them's usually touching their arm, like, he pushed me. You're like, well, why are you touching? Okay. And we need to work through. It's usually punching, kicking, yelling, end of the world kind of stuff, right? And then we have to work through how to reconcile what has just happened. And we do. And the boys are usually pretty good at this. Sometimes they want to receive an apology or demand one. And other times an apology gets given and they're like, I don't want it. We work through that too, right? And so this is what it means to be reconciled, is you have this moment where you work through your differences and you come to terms with the person that you have that discourse with. You see, I want you guys to, how many of you are journaling? Start to write down, is there somebody in your life that you have discourse with right now? Is there somebody in your life that you've had discourse with in the past? And I want you to just think about that in your mind, because when we think about discourse in the past, we go, let it just stay in the past. And it's like, well, no. Because if you leave it in the past, what's going to happen is that there's still this invisible wall between you and this person. You see them in the shopping mall, wherever, and you're like, oop, there they are, right? And you have this bitterness, this hatred that you've allowed to remain in your heart. And so when we're talking about discourse, I want you guys to think about, and even write down if you have something that you're writing on, names of people who you have discourse with or have had. And this is important, because this invisible barrier, all right, what is it? I don't know. Pain, maybe some shame, maybe guilt. Maybe it's words that you can't unspeak, actions that you can't undo, thoughts that just won't seem to leave your mind. You just have this hatred and it can't stay there. And so how can reconciliation exist against this kind of barrier? Well, I want to give you guys a little example. I'm not going to get into the details because that story would take forever, okay? Because discourse stories do. But when we went to our last church, Beth and I, before we came here, we had some discourse with some people that we loved very, very dearly. And they said something to us. And, oh man, it sent me in a spiral. Sent both of us in a spiral. And I don't know if they truly realized what that spiral did to, like what was done to us. For months, for like a year or longer, I just tried to pretend that there was nothing, that I kept going to church, treated them like they were, like nothing was wrong, right? But underneath there was this tone of unforgiveness, bitterness, and it just seethed in my life. And then there was this season where Jesus obviously slapped me awake and went, that's enough of that, right? And I went to another church. This was this worship moment. And my goodness, when God speaks, I mean, it's impossible to ignore. I went up to the front, and then he's like, you need to forgive somebody. And I was like, And I ignored that because it's so easy to ignore, right? You're like, yes, sir, I heard that. Forgiveness. Yeah. And then I went on, and then the next week go to a completely different church. We went to our in-laws' church, and there the pastor looks at me, and he's like, you need to forgive somebody. Do you know who it is? I was like, And I went into the car later that week, and I was like, okay, God, hey, how do I forgive, right? How do we reconcile? How? How can it be done? We take this pain and offense and bitterness, and we like to hold on to it for some reason. We want to be justified in our actions and our thoughts about them and our hatred towards what they've done. And we don't want to reconcile. That's not what you're called to be. That's not what was done to you. Should God do that to us? Not reconcile us back to himself? No. So what about our relationship with God? We've all sinned. We all fall short. We'll get to that verse today. We are all broken people. We've all done things that can't be undone. We've all said things that can't be unsaid, thoughts that we've had towards God that can't be unthought, prayers that we've all yelled in the vehicle towards him, right? And so what is it that separates us from God? So I just have a short list of 20, okay? Okay? Let's be honest, it's short, okay? You know how many things can separate us from God? Like, once you start going, okay, the list goes on, all right? But here's some things that can separate us from God. Pride, addiction, pornography, envy, anger, lust, a rebel heart, worry, adultery, complacency, gluttony, homosexuality, selfishness, fear, dishonor, hatred, greed, lies, laziness, and doubt. Like I said, this is not exhaustive, okay? Also, for you visual people, I put it in a visual thing, okay? A long time ago I did this, okay? It was actually really cool. We were talking about how we get over them, and we had somebody with a hammer breaking through each one of those words. It was awesome, okay? It's a video. I'm not going to show it to you, all right? But this is our board. This is our barrier. Okay, what's on yours between you and God? You know, I don't. And so what is it that needs to get addressed? There are so many things that we justify in our lives, that we allow to stay there, that we allow to not, go checked. They need to get checked. And so what's your barrier? What words are on it? And so as I go through the message, if one comes to mind, just write it down. Don't ignore it. What a waste of your own time. Let's be honest, okay? You came this morning to hear the word, and Jesus is saying, no, when you have a barrier, and we need to get rid of it. Write it down. Matthew 22:37-40 said this. And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on these two commandments depends all the law and the prophets. And so if we are commanded to love God and love each other, love our neighbors, then we need to reconcile. We do. Our relationships are worth reconciling. Okay? If we are called to love God and to love our neighbors, then how can we be content to not reconcile? To be at odds with one another. And so be honest with yourself. And as we go through, just write down. We need reconciliation in our lives. And without reconciliation, like I already said, bitterness is going to grow. Where bitterness is going to grow, malcontent and rebellious heart towards God is going to stir. And before you know it, you might even start to have hatred towards God. And so we need reconciliation. And so how can these barriers be reconciled? How? How can it be reconciled? This divide is great, okay? It's sin and it's death. These things are massive barriers. If you look at them, sometimes it feels like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get free of that. I don't know. And I want you to understand right now that it's actually quite easy. And we're going to get into how easy that is. Okay? Are you going to be perfect for the rest of your life? Absolutely not. Okay? That's not how this works. That's not how this is going to work this morning. Okay? So I want you to take just the stress of needing to be and just leave it at the door. Okay? Because there's nothing you can do to receive what what he's given to us, right? It is removed by Jesus. He reconciles us back through his grace and through his forgiveness, and we can only receive it through faith. Only way. That's just you accepting him, his way, his authority, his kingship. In our minds, we love to justify these barriers, and we love to justify that we can receive grace maybe even through our works, and it's just not true. And so we're going to touch on justification. We love to justify our position. We love to justify our sin. We like to go, this one isn't that bad, right? I can leave that for a while. We need to address, I've already addressed that, actually, which is great, right? We love to just ignore the ones we want to ignore. And so justification, I have this here, cleared of all sin charges by Jesus. We need to make sure that that's clear, okay? Cleared of all sin charges by Jesus. And then wrath removed by his love and grace. And we're going to get into that later too. But justification is being made righteous by him, which means good, right lawful, correct, holy, exonerated of all sin charges. And so who is it that judges our actions? If we're talking about this in a legal term, who's the judge? Okay, we know who the judge is. It's Jesus. If you didn't, guess what? I'm going to read it in the Word just so it goes home in your brain going, yes, absolutely. Okay? Acts 10, 42, 43. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one appointed by God to be judge of the living and the dead. To him all the prophets bear witness that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sin through his name. So he's the judge. Not you. Stop justifying. Stop being the judge. Okay? Him. And our sin, what happens is this barrier, this sin keeps us legally bound, prevented from being justified in God's sight because he is against sin. That is, his morality says that is not good. And so you have wronged. You are guilty. That is true. Sin is what God says is wrong. God's law of what is right and wrong. His morality. And so that's what you need to understand about sin. Don't justify it in your own life, okay? Stop looking at the word and justifying which ones you want to justify. It's not how it works. He's the judge, not us. And let me tell you, my brain would love to be judge at different moments in my life, right? You guys probably all agree. Right? There's moments where you're like, man, maybe it's not that big of a deal, right? You can see that in these different moments where you just want to justify what you're about to do or what you've just done or whatever it is. We do this, and we like to be our own judge at our own trial. We know what the moral ground that the entire planet should stand on, right? That's what we want, often. And so, but that's just not how it works. We have this barrier, this sin, all of these things and more that keep us separated from God. And so we know that if God is judge, then he knows what is right and what is wrong. And so instead, we need to stop justifying our actions, stop justifying our words, stop justifying our desire, stop justifying, I don't need to reconcile with that person, okay? I don't need to do that. I don't need to work through forgiveness. I don't need to apologize, maybe. We justify not reconciling with God. I don't need to apologize to him. He owes me an apology, actually, right? Here. But the thing is, Jesus knew that we'd love to justify ourselves, and I want to read you just a little piece of scripture. Luke 16, 14 to 15. Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all these things, and they ridiculed Jesus and said to them, and he said to them, "You are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. For what is exalted among men is an abomination in the sight of God." The Pharisees constantly scoffed and snickered at Jesus, constantly justifying themselves, their own laws, extra laws on top of the law. They're justifying their position. Are we just a room full of Pharisees justifying our positions? And how many positions are there? How many differences, even among this room, would there be if we justified our position? How can there be truth if there is, how many people in this room? 300, 400 people? Justifying their own choice of what morality is? Anarchy. It wouldn't work. How would you even have a trial? You couldn't. Someone would be deeming themselves guilty, or, which would be shock. And then other people would be like, oh, I'm obviously not guilty. And then the next person would be like, no, you're clearly guilty. Okay, you just killed this person, right? How can that work? No, we love to justify. And so if we are a room full of Pharisees as well, that's in your heart and you can see it right there. It's okay. We've all been there. We all have. Be honest with yourself. Do we follow Jesus? Do we put him on the throne, his morality, his words over our words, his choices over our choices? Do we justify his position as judge? We have to justify him. That's what you guys need to understand. Stop justifying yourself. You need to justify Jesus. That's who. He's the one that sits on the throne. He's the one that judges the world, not you. We need to justify him in his position. We need to come and worship him. So stop justifying yourself today. We need to justify God's word. We need to justify God's desire. And we need to justify God as judge. And just so you know, once again, we're going to read the word just so you go home knowing that that's true. Romans 3, 1-4 says this. Then what advantage has the Jew? Or what is the value of circumcision? Much in every way, to begin with, the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. What if some were unfaithful? Does their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? Does their unfaithfulness make God unfaithful? No. Let God be true, though every one were a liar. As it is written, that you may be justified in your words and prevail when you're judged. We're actually going to go to where that was written, which is in Psalms 51, 4-7. Against you only have I sinned, God, and done what is evil in your sight, so that you may be justified in your words and blameless in your judgment. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, you delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret heart. So purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Psalms 51, 4-7. Against you I have sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you may be justified in your words and blameless in your judgment. Blameless in your judgment. These passages show us that we need to realize one thing. There's a barrier between us and God. And that barrier is sin. We need to realize our sin for what it actually is. Do you realize your sin for what it actually is? Do you look at it and go, you said this is wrong, and I need to just come to you as judge? Do we do that? Have we ever? Maybe some of us? These passages are hard because you're putting the authority out of your hands and you're giving it to God. He's the judge. We justify his position. He is the only one that is truly blameless. He is the only one that can actually go in a court and not be guilty. And so what happens if the barrier is not removed? What happens if we don't remove the barrier? What happens if we don't choose Jesus? Well, Jesus is going to judge the world. And if we choose not to remove the barrier and be reconciled to God, we are going to get sin and we're going to get death. Eternal torment, eternal death. Torment with our sin and all of everybody else's. Do you imagine? Separation from God. If we choose Jesus, what happens? Well, we need to realize our sin for what it is. Do we want to be tormented for the rest of the time with it by everyone else's? In a place? No, of course not. We need to accept it for what it actually is. And so, I think this one, right? Yeah, I got a lot here. We're going to start reading in Romans 3. So if you want to flip there, we're going to read in Romans 3 for a bit. We're going to start at verse 9. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to keep going. But if we choose Jesus, we need to realize that sin is a barrier between us and him. And so we're going to read starting at verse 9. What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greek, are under sin. As it is written, no one is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside, and together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood, and in their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. So, man, as we're reading, doesn't this just feel like our world, right? No one is righteous. Everyone, all have turned aside. Together they become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. When I look at this world, it's just everyone living for self. It's how can I get more? And usually, if you go to the side, it's okay by me, right? It's I'm living underneath my morality, my truth, my way, right? Or even this, how many times have I heard, oh, that's not my Jesus. My Jesus doesn't say that. And we like to make Jesus into who he should be, which is really just saying the same thing as, that's not my truth, right? We put our morality even on Jesus. And here, right, is the next passage we're going to read. So, if we're not saved and justified by our works, then what does justify us? Romans 21. But now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. Although the law and the prophets bear witness to it, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there is no distinction. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified by his grace as a gift. Just pause a moment. Okay, all have sinned. All fall short. And then all are justified by his grace, not through your works, like we just read in the last passage, but as a gift. Let's keep reading. Through the redemption that is Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood, to be received by faith. So, justified by grace as a gift, received how? By faith. What does that mean? What does that mean? Received by faith. We are justified, made righteous, good, right, legal, correct, holy, by grace, given to us by Jesus, by his sacrifice on the cross. The sacrifice of Jesus in the cross is how we are made rich. We talked about you're richer than you think. You are rich in grace and forgiveness and life eternal. That grace is a gift. And so we receive this richness when we trust in Jesus and we form our lives around his way, not our own. We make him the authority. We say, no, you're the judge, you're the king, you're the ruler, not me. Get me off the throne. Get me off. Okay? You're up there. When we do that and we say yes to him and we follow him, that's what that means. Done. You've received this gift because you've put him as the center of your life. His ruling. The cool part is we reject the tree. Go back to Genesis, right? We reject the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We look at that tree and we say, no, I don't want that. He says, hey, you can have everything here except the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. And we all took it. Hook, line, and sinker, bunch of, just wusses, let's be honest. We saw that and we went, yes, I want to know good and evil for myself, right? Let's go see if God, you're telling the truth. And we take the apple and we bite it, and our morality turns sour really quickly. Cain and Abel, Tower of Babel, man, he had to flood the earth. We were so evil. That's what our morality gets. And so now, when you're saying yes to Jesus, you're rejecting the tree back at the beginning, right? In fact, I found a slide online, which I thought was amazing. I wanted to show it to you guys, okay? Justification. Maybe this should be the title of this section of the sermon. Justification, 3 reasons to reject a tree. I don't have 3 exactly, but there's a lot more than that, let's be honest. Okay? Or should it be this? Okay? 3 reasons to reject a tree and accept this one. Because in place of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Jesus puts the cross. Forgiven. Grace. All of your sin, you choosing to walk away, all of it is gone. It's done. You don't even need to work for that. He just wants to reconcile you back so badly, so much, that he replaced that tree with a new one to make it possible. To help us understand and interact, okay, with us going into the courtroom and not justifying ourselves, and Jesus going, man, I'm going to take your place here. I want you to understand what that looks like a little bit more. So there's 2 pictures I want you guys just to listen. Don't go flipping anywhere. If you want to flip later, go look it up online, and you can read it at home, okay? I'm not cheating the word, okay? I'm going into Jeremiah. You didn't think I was going to say Jeremiah, did you? But in Jeremiah, God opposes his people. His people have walked away over and over and over. In fact, Israel walked away so often. There wasn't a single king in Israel when they split off, when they had the separation. The nation of Israel, not a single king that followed God, not one. And then Judah, there was 8 kings only. And how many people just walked away from God? Oh, man. And so God goes, okay, that's enough. We're going to address this right here and now. He's opposing his people, and this is what he says. Jeremiah 25, starting at verse 15. Thus the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me, okay, take from my hand this cup of the wine of wrath. Make all the nations to whom I send you drink it. They shall drink and stagger and be crazed of the sword that I am sending among them. He sends his wrath, his cup, for us to drink. And then I'm going to just paraphrase. I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I'm just going through all the nations because there's so many. Starting at verse 17. So I took the cup from the Lord's hand and made all the nations to whom the Lord sent me to drink it. Jerusalem, Judah, Egypt, Philistines, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, Sidon, the coastland kings of the sea, the kings of Arabia, the mixed tribes that dwell in the desert, the kings of Media, all the kings of the north, far and near, one after another, all the kingdoms of the world that are on the face of the earth, and after them the king of Babylon shall drink. Then you shall say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, drink, be drunk, and vomit, fall and rise no more, because of the sword I am sending among you. This cup of wrath is the judgment that we are all going to get. Every single person on this world. And God is patient. He is kind. He waited how many years? How many generations does he need to wait? How many? He's a patient God. He gives his word and then he waits patiently for us to respond and turn to him. Over and over he gave this to Israel. And now in Jeremiah he goes, okay, that's enough. The wrath is coming. You can't avoid it. Take this cup. This terrible wrath is what Israel and Judah deserved, as well as the whole world. And so here's this passage that I want us to rest on, though, okay? This is Matthew 26, 36 to 39. This is Jesus praying in the garden. And then Jesus went with him to a place called Gethsemane. Oh, that's a tough word, Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And talking with him, Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Jesus turns and prays for God to take the cup from him. By his willingness to go to the cross for you, to reconcile you back to him. Man, think about this, the judge of you. The judge goes, I'll be guilty for that. I'll be guilty. We're on the stand, and he goes, put me up there. The cup that was meant for us to drink, he took it from us and goes, you go sit over here. He subjected himself to our judgment, and he goes before Caiaphas and the religious council. He goes before Pontius Pilate, and Pontius asks, he goes, what do you guys want? And instead, the council of the world, the judge that we are, chooses Barabbas, a well-known criminal. And we go and kill that man right there, Jesus. If we rely on our own moral standing ground, we're terrible. We will choose incorrectly. We are easily corrupted, poor judges. Jesus, innocent, was crucified in Barabbas' place, our place, on the cross. That which was made for us, he took. The cup that we were supposed to drink, he drank himself. Known sinners we are, marked by sin. We chose sin, we chose death. That's what we said when we walk away from God. And Jesus, God, his love for us to reconcile that division, that barrier that you've written down, whichever it is, in your thought or on your paper, he is removed. It's gone. He didn't just tear it down and was like, oh, well, just maybe we'll erect this later. It's like, no, that's gone. It's finished. That's God's way. Grace received through faith that we do not deserve. His justification, his holiness, his authority, His correctness, His goodness, His faithfulness.
Thanks for listening to this week's message from Spruce Grove Alliance Church. For more information or to hear past messages, please visit sgac.net.